Welcome to Chapter 14, Altruism and Cooperation. Altruism can be defined as unselfish behavior that benefits other people without regard to the consequence for ourselves. There's some debate as to whether this exists in its pure form. Some people suggest that we always get something personally useful out of any behavior, and that true, pure altruism does not exist. For example, we may get social benefits such as praise and attention, and we may reduce our own personal distress by helping someone else. Daniel Batson argues that there is pure altruism, and that this comes into play when we have empathic concern for someone. That is, when we identify with someone in need, including feeling and understanding what they're experiencing, accompanied by an intention to help them. He argues that only then will we be truly altruistic. In cases where we do not have empathic concern, he suggests that those social rewards mentioned previously are what direct our behavior. How to measure this, though? In a 1982 study, Batson and his colleague had students listen to a taped interview with a student who had ostensibly broken both legs in an accident and was behind in classes. Two factors were manipulated: empathetic versus non-empathetic set, which was manipulated by giving instructions to the subjects. And the second factor was the cost of helping, manipulated by whether or not the injured student was expected to be seen every day once she returned to class. As predicted, people in the high empathy condition helped regardless of cost, while those in the low empathy condition helped only if the cost was not very high. Other evidence for Batson's empathy altruism hypothesis includes findings that people who feel empathy are more likely to engage in volunteerism. Bystander intervention is another example of when people may help someone in distress. Studying this phenomenon became a major focus of social psychology research after the 1964 Kitty Genovese case. She was murdered while walking home from work, and a number of her neighbors heard her scream, and yet no one intervened. At least that's the story that came out at the time. Later research showed that some people did come to help. They just got there too late to save her. But at the time, those who didn't call to help gave investigators explanations such as, "I was tired," "we thought it was a lover's quarrel," or "we were afraid." One of the factors that may have been operating was the number of people who witnessed the attack. By most accounts, at least 38 of her neighbors saw Kitty being attacked. And research tends to show that the more people who observe an emergency, the less likely that each person is to help. This is called diffusion of responsibility. In another study demonstrating this, when participants believed that someone was having a seizure, 85% of them helped if they were the only person present. If there was one other person present, 62% helped, and if multiple people were present, only 31% helped. The characteristics of the person needing help matter as well. Several studies have shown that bystanders are likely to help victims who scream and make their needs known 75 to 100% of the time, but only 20 to 40% of the time if the victims are silent. Before helping someone, we must first understand that the person needs our assistance. Sometimes this is unclear. If everybody is looking around for a cue, that means that no one is helping, and the person may need help and not get any. We call this pluralistic ignorance, where people assume that everybody else knows what's going on, what's needed, and this pervades the entire group, so that nobody initiates the process of helping. The context also matters. People are more likely to receive help in rural areas than in urban areas, perhaps because in rural areas there are fewer people and everyone knows everyone, and so one's reputation matters more. As you can see in this chart, one study found that across 5 different opportunities to help, people in rural areas were much more likely to help than people in urban areas. Social class matters as well. A number of studies have found that people with more wealth give away a smaller percentage of their wealth than do people who are relatively poorer. In the study depicted here from 2010, the tendency for lower class people to act more pro-socially was tied to their tendency to feel more empathic concern for strangers in need. Participants were given the chance to help an obviously distressed Confederate who had arrived late for the experiment and therefore needed the participants' assistance to complete required tasks. Before this opportunity to provide help, participants watched either a neutral film clip or a moving portrayal of the suffering of children in poverty. In the 2 groups that saw the film about children in poverty, the amount of help was the same. However, when this compassion was not induced by showing a film about children in poverty, persons of lower social class tended to help more than those of upper social class. This suggests that the tendency for persons who are of lower social classes to help more is due to their empathy for people. Most of the world's major religions emphasize compassion, altruism, and kindness, as indicated in the chart here. Priming people to think about religious concepts has an effect on their willingness to give a gift to a stranger, as shown here. Those who were primed to think about religious words were more likely to give something to a stranger than those who were not. Feeling that we're being observed also has an effect on our altruism. In the study depicted here, persons were given an opportunity to give away some money or no money to a stranger. Those who saw the picture on the left were more likely to give away some money. In fact, 75% of them did versus the people on the right who only 60% gave away money. If you'll notice, the figure on the left is more similar to the human face shape with 2 eyes watching you than the figure on the right. Evolution theory predicts that we will attempt to help our genes survive, which means that the more closely related to us someone is, the more we're likely to help them since they share many of the same genes with us. This is referred to as kin selection, as in we are more likely to help our kin than strangers. Reciprocal altruism occurs in situations in which we have ongoing relationships with people. The idea here is that I help you now and you will help me in the future. Cooperation is a feature of most human societies. By cooperating, we're able to accomplish much more than we can individually. However, we don't want to be taken advantage of. The field of game theory has developed a number of experiments to test this. One of the classic ones is the prisoner's dilemma. In the original experiment, there are 2 prisoners who have to decide between sticking to their story or betraying their partner without knowing what the partner will do. If they both stick to the story, they both win. If they both turn on their partner, they both lose. But if one defects while the other cooperates, one wins big and the other loses big. You can represent this economically with the matrix shown here. You're given an opportunity to decide whether you will cooperate with your partner or defect. If you both cooperate, each of you gets $5. If you cooperate and your partner defects, you get nothing and the partner gets $8. If you defect and your partner cooperates, you get $8 and they get 0. If you both defect, that is, if you both turn on the other one, each of you gets $2. So the biggest overall payoff is for both of you to cooperate. However, the biggest individual payoff is for you to defect when the partner cooperates. However, you don't know what they're going to do. Whether we cooperate with people is largely determined by whether we trust them. And our trust depends on the reputation of the other person and our past experiences with them. One of the reasons that reputation is important is that it maximizes the opportunities for us and for people that we interact with in economic transactions. Some interesting ways that expectations affect behavior in the prisoner's dilemma have been demonstrated through a number of studies. People who are more competitive are more likely to assume that others are competitive and will thus defect against them. People also become more competitive when they're primed with words related to hostility. One really interesting priming effect comes from the name given to the game. Playing the exact same game, people are more likely to cooperate when it's called the community game than when it's called the Wall Street game, even though the rules and odds are identical in the two processes. Of course, as in all things, cultural beliefs influence cooperation. Some cultures value this more than others. One way this has been demonstrated is with another game theory experiment called the ultimatum game. One participant is given a sum of money and is allowed to allocate that sum between himself and another person. They can divide it up any way they want. In cultures that require a large amount of interdependence to survive, resources are allocated much more fairly. And in fact, in some cultures, the average person will offer more than half of the sum to their partner. People will also pay a penalty to punish those who give them unfair offers. For example, in the United States, offers of less than 20% are usually rejected. What happens in this situation is nobody gets any money. So people are willing to give up the $20 to punish the other person for offering them only 20% of the pot. This suggests that fairness is an important component of social interactions. One of the strategies that seems to work well in these games that balances cooperation with the need not to be taken advantage of is the tit-for-tat strategy. In this strategy, the first move is to cooperate. Afterwards, your move is to do what the other person did the last time. Over time, this tends to lead to higher degrees of cooperation. There are a number of reasons for this, as demonstrated here. It is, in the long run, the most successful strategy. However, in shorter times, that is, 1 or 2 trials, it may not work as well. I'd like to leave you with some positive news. A 2019 study in the journal Science studied whether people would turn in a wallet that they found on the street. The researchers did this experiment in 40 different countries and tested a total of 17,000 lost wallets. Contrary to expectations, the more money they put in the wallet, the more people were likely to return it. That is, people were more likely to give back a larger amount of money and therefore deprive themselves of it. This suggests that we do have somewhat of an innate sense of fairness. There were large differences among countries, but the overall finding was that people are pretty good about returning things that aren't theirs. And if you're wondering, the United States is roughly in the middle of all of these countries. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you next time.